It's a sad day, true believers. Stan Lee has passed away at the age of 95. I'm Jim Vivid. I'm joined by Joshua Yale. Joshua, this man has had a huge impact on not only generations of artists and fans, but on IGN itself. I don't think we would exist really as a company quite the way we are without Stan Lee's contributions.
Yeah, he's just made so much. It's hard to find a person in the world who hasn't been like touched by his creative efforts, like his warm, charming personality and his sense of humor. And I feel like we've kind of like seen this coming a little bit. He's like canceled appearances, and he's not been in the best of health. Always in a great attitude, though. Very upbeat no matter what's happened. He's always posting on Twitter and stuff. But yeah, it's crazy that he's gone.
I mean, Stan Lee has meant obviously so much to comic book artists, to filmmakers, to actors, the actors that have worked in the MCU, but just amongst us fans, grew up with not only the comics, but he was also a voice in cartoons. So like when I was little, I had the trade paperbacks of all the Marvel Origins, which were the original like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Ditko, that kind of run of comic book origins, and I love them, and I love that sort of very, arch, over-the-top style of back in the day, and how colorful everything is. But also, Stan himself as a personality, he was in the Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends cartoon. He was the voiceover in that. So as a kid, you hear that voice, and it just stays with you. He was such a character in his own right.
Yes, and that's totally was the appeal of Stan and why he became so big, very larger than life, because he became the mascot, of the spokesperson for Marvel and for comic books in general. Yeah. He has like signature phrases like Excelsior, and yeah, he was in the voice in animated series, in video games. Yeah. He made appearances on talk shows and radio and everything, and he was everywhere, really just promoting comics and all of his most iconic creations, co-creations with the likes of Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, Fantastic Four, the Hulk, like the list goes on.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think though too that because he himself as a personality was such a great salesman, frankly.
Yes.
He helped bring comics, Marvel comics in particular, into the mainstream, but I think his reach, it's pretty fair to say, is beyond just Marvel comics. I mean, DC Comics was very classy in their tributes to him. He did work for them at one point.
Yeah, he like reinvented like DC characters. Like there's a Stan Lee version of Batman you should go check out.
Yeah, I mean, he has helped lift this entire medium into something that went from being, back in the day of the comics code, and it was looked down on, to a mainstream pop culture phenomenon.
Yeah, he really did tap into something universal about one of his comic book characters. They weren't these like godlike characters like you might see in DC, but they were very personable, relatable characters,
accessible.
And that's what he tapped into. Of like Fantastic Four was a family before they were a team of superheroes, right? And like Spider-Man was like this guy just trying to pay the rent and take care of his elderly aunt, on top of trying to like stop the Green Goblin. So it was that was the magic, and that he applied that to all of his characters, and he created Black Panther with Jack Kirby, which you wouldn't think, but yeah, that was an incredibly progressive, character for the time, and he's done so much to just bring these characters and have them speak to our lives.
Yeah, over a half a century of contributions to popular culture. But his impressions though aren't just in comics, obviously, as we mentioned. He's also in tons of movies, makes a lot of appearances in not only the MCU but beyond that, in like X-Men movies. And I think he as a personality, as a character, somebody who's quotable, popping up in movies and TV shows is going to help keep his legacy alive, I think, even longer.
Yeah, it's always like the moment where the crowd claps and cheers whenever he appears in any movie, and he always has these like great one-liners. So it's always great, and it's actually, while we're talking about that, we haven't seen the last of Stan Lee in these movie cameo roles, because we know that he's already filmed a handful of cameos for movies that haven't come out yet. I think it's safe to say he'll probably show up in Captain Marvel, Marvel,
Yeah.
in the final Avengers movie, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was in Spider-Man Far From Home because that just wrapped as well. So,
and those are the ones we know about.
Yeah.
Everyone loves Stan. He could have popped up in other things. We'll see. I mean, we don't know for a fact, but there's also the animated Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse coming up. We'll see if he pops up in there.
If he was in
the
Teen
game.
Titans Go to the movies, and he can be in anything.
Yeah, exactly. But we've also been fortunate enough in our careers here at IGN to get to meet Stan Lee. I met him about probably 12 years ago, and
Really?
I'd seen him a bunch of times since, but to actually talk with him, I was at a party after a Comic-Con panel, and he's in there, and he's, everyone's talking to him, and I go up and I tell him, the first time I went to New York City, I read Marvel Comics as a kid, and you guys were so specific about where the neighborhoods and where people, all the characters lived, that I found my way around New York City. And he goes, that's incredible. All these years I thought I was writing adventure stories. I was writing a travelogue. So that's my Stan Lee anecdote. Joshua, you've met him, I'm sure, a bunch of
I have
times.
met him actually just once, and it was a wonderful, just short interview, and he was great. At the end, he just turned to me and he goes, "You're a great interviewer," and I knew he said that to everybody because I've heard tons of other people tell that same story, but I was still happy that I got my turn. And you got to tell me.
Well, thanks for sharing that memory, Joshua. We want to hear what Stan Lee meant to you, so please let us know in the comments. If you're missing Stan like we are, revisit some of his cameos from the MCU. And on behalf of everyone here at IGN, Excelsior.